So now we switch to English to introduce the next speaker. He's an opinion leader. I follow him for many years. I think he's a strong thinker of how AI will impact economy and society, which is what we are going to talk about now. He can go very technically, very deep technically. So he can program, he can build agents. He has a startup called Kentauros AI that builds agents for other companies. And he can also talk about economy, jobs, and all these things that I think are very important, especially in this forum where we talk about the future of work. He's preparing because I don't know if you're ready, Daniel.
I'm ready.
Okay, so a big applause for Daniel Jeffries.
So lo siento for my Spanish. It's horrible. So you're going to have to listen to English for a little bit. But my AI can speak pretty good Spanish, so I'll bring her on later to explain a few things. Today I'm going to talk to you about something that I haven't shared with anyone yet. I don't use slides. I find them boring. Sorry for the other presenters. But look, I'm going to share this thing because I want to help you get an understanding of where things are going. I want to help you get your mind around the changes that are coming. And I think at the beginning of any new technological revolution, it is very hard to get your bearings. It's very hard to get an understanding, because it's almost like there's a dense fog around it. There's all of this hype, there's fear, there's outright insanity, there's wild expectations. And so it's very hard at the beginning of a technological revolution to understand what's happening, right? And so hopefully this framework that I'm going to give you will help you get a better understanding in your life, your business, what it means for you and your kids. So let's talk about what this means, kind of, right? So to start with, it all kind of begins with fire, right? So what is fire? It's an element, it's a force of nature. But fire is something else. When somebody was cold, when they wanted to get warm, when they wanted to cook their food, fire becomes something else entirely. It becomes a solution to a problem, right? Now, animals spend something like 50 to 80% of their day eating and digesting their food because their food is raw. And fire outside is like it's having a stomach outside of your body, right? It allowed us to cook our food and then spend a lot of our time not eating, right? Which let us do more interesting things, right? And so we moved up the stack, if you will, to more interesting problems. And that's going to be a bit of a theme that we hit here. So fire is in itself technology, right? And really, what is technology? Technology is really nothing but solved problems. You abstract away the problem below and you move up the stack, right? And the movement of civilization is abstraction stacking. You solve a problem and that becomes the new floor that everyone stands on, right? So that's really what it is. Somebody is cold, somebody needed to get warm, that becomes a solution to a problem. So technology, if you take nothing else away from this talk, is really nothing but solved problems, right? And the interesting thing is that when we solve a problem, we create new problems, right? So complexity breeds more complexity, right? And so what you end up with is you abstract the old problem away, you move up. Now, a lot of people sitting in the room, they're thinking, how do I get in on this AI thing? How do I do what I'm already doing, but make it faster and more efficient, right? The problem is that's kind of the wrong question, because there are two kinds of technological changes. There's a refinement to an existing technology, right? So you make your motor a little more efficient, you make it you make it quieter, you make it go farther on a tank of gas or on a battery. That's a refinement to an existing problem. So if you're asking, how do I take artificial intelligence and then just do what I've always been doing, but make it a little more efficient or faster, you're not understanding what's happening right now, right? And then there's a leap, and that's when something fundamentally changes in the world, right? So you go from horses to steam power, right? You go from the printing press not existing to the printing press existing, right? If you're making predictions about the future, what it's going to be like on the day that Gutenberg invents the printing press, all of your predictions are going to be wrong now, right? Because it fundamentally changes the possibilities of what you can do in life. It's going to fundamentally change society. So that's what a leap is. If a technology creates a new floor, all the technologies are not equal. Some technologies are a huge leap, right? You go up maybe 10 floors or 100 floors or 1,000 floors. So if you think about something like the invention of, well, we talked about the horse earlier, right? A horse is at a burst can do about 15, for a short burst, about 15 horsepower. A human can do about 1.2 horsepower at a quick burst, but a sustained push of humans is 0.1 horsepower, okay? So it takes 10 humans working over the course of a typical day to equal the output of one horse, right? Now, how do we measure our motors? Well, we still have a nod to the old world. We measure them in horsepower, right? So a modern motor, gas or steam powered, whatever, becomes 150, 300 horsepower, right? It becomes much faster. You take a nuclear turbine, that's 1.3 million to 2.5 million horsepower spinning that turbine. So that's an exponential leap. That's fundamentally different than the move from man to horse, right? It changes all the possibilities that are there. So all technologies are not created equal, and that's really important for you to understand as you're kind of trying to figure out what the heck does all this mean for me, for my business, for my children. These are the right questions that you should be asking. These are important. So, but first, to do that, you have to kind of understand this pattern, right? And that is, if technology is abstraction, then civilization is abstraction stacking. All of the things that you are enjoying in this room, that microphone, the phone in your pocket, the chair that you're sitting on, the shoes that you're wearing on your feet, glasses that you're wearing, your watch, you are standing on the shoulders of giants. That is an abstracted solution. That is a solution to a previous problem that you no longer have to think about. None of you tanned leather today to make your clothes. None of you hunted and gathered your food. Somebody solved that problem for you historically, right? We moved up the stack to solve more interesting problems. But again, you create more problems. So agriculture is an answer to, how do I reliably eat? But it creates problems of land ownership, creates problems of governance, creates taxation problems, right? Last speaker was talking about problems of governance, right? Those problems come from the complexity, right? Writing. How do we remember things from generation to generation? That creates problems of education, literacy, record keeping, right? Printing press. How do we scale knowledge? How do we share it at scale? Creates problems of intellectual property, right? Creates problems of publishing, journalism, these kinds of things. The steam engine. How do we generate mechanical power without muscles? Right? And now you have problems of worker safety, factory design, trains, right? These kinds of things. Electricity. How do we get energy everywhere? And now you have electrical safety codes, fire codes, these kinds of things. The internet, Think about these things and notice there's a pattern. And each solution solves one problem, creates more problems, right? Creates more interesting work, right? So the thing is, new technology also moves the bottleneck of expectation, okay? So the hammer, if we think about it like this, think about something like mud huts. When you could build a mud hut, you could only build your dwelling so high. But then somebody invents hammers and nails, standardized boards, and now you can build more complex structures. You can build taller structures, and you create these more challenges. Now you have building codes and fire codes so that you don't burn down your neighbor's house, right? But it doesn't suddenly reduce the amount of work, okay? You have a ton of labor-saving devices in your house. You have a dishwasher. clothes, you have a clothes washer. We're in Europe, so you probably don't have a dryer, unfortunately. But the thing is, right? Do you do less work around the house now? The answer is no, right? And why is that? If you're the first person to get a dryer in the world, then you've got an advantage, right? You're doing maybe an hour less work. But pretty soon everybody has a dryer. And suddenly it becomes, or a dishwasher, and suddenly the expectation is dishwasher speed. You're supposed to get it done that fast. So we now fill the time up with something else. And now with artificial intelligence, the default is going to be artificial intelligence speed. If you're the first one to get there, you've got an advantage. But if not, that's just going to become the default way of doing things. So when people say, well, we'll get to this later, I don't want to think about this or whatever, they're going to be in trouble in the sort of next generation, because that's going to be the speed, right? So when you understand this, I want you to understand one thing, and that is that, like, the stack of abstraction stacking is infinite. Now, in other words, you always have more problems. One problem gets solved, then the problem gets boring. It's something we don't think about. You flick the light to turn on, you flick the switch to turn on the light this morning. Did you think about that at all? Of course not. You just flicked on the light and it worked. Now, a Babylonian worker in the distant past had to work many hours, maybe many weeks, to generate the fraction of light that you generate without thinking about it for a second, right? So the stack is infinite. It gets boring. The solution becomes the new floor everybody stands on. A whole new layer of work appears above that. And then there's new expectations and new speed that we're going to be expected to work at, right? And so then every time leadership starts to make the same mistakes, they go, cool, how do I just bolt this on, to the thing that I'm doing already and just do it the same way, right? And that's not the right question. What you want to be asking is, what can I do now that was impossible yesterday? Right? What can I do that I could not do before? And that's not a rhetorical difference between those two questions. One is, how you become a case study, and one is how you thrive in the world that's coming. So a lot of people say AI is different. I think AI is very different in terms of a technology. I also think it's not different at all. I think the pattern of history holds, but it is different. You do need to understand something. I built a technology, I built a program last year in 6 months that would have taken me, 2 or 3 years to build, but, I couldn't sell it. So AI moves things faster, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the problem gets solved. But AI is going to amplify intelligence itself. Now, that is very different. That is very different when you think about what that means, right? It's like everything that we have today, this computer, again, that microphone, all of that came from intelligence, right? Somebody thought about this thing, somebody did something, used their hands, made this thing. Intelligence is the spark, it's the engine of creation. So for the first time in history, we're going to have something other than us that helps with that discovery process, that's inventing new things, that's helping us cure diseases faster, right? That's helping us learn things quicker than we've ever learned before, helping discover new materials, right? These kinds of things. So this is very different than the things we've had in the past, right? And it's going to accelerate in how we do these kinds of things. And that's really just the tip of the iceberg, robot maids, and we have dark factories now. It was interesting to see the Estrella Dam picture, right? The most striking thing out of that presentation to me was the factory in the past and the factory in the future, right? A factory with a ton of people going to work. They got their cap on, they're having a beer, they're chatting, they're probably moving at pretty slow speed, not getting things done especially efficiently. And all of a sudden you get to the new one, you didn't see any people on that floor, right? A couple of guys driving around with a forklift, everything stacked super high. It's totally different, right? It's completely, in China, there's already what they call dark factories that they don't even need to turn the lights on because there's no humans in them. Now people go, oh my God, what if it's going to do all the jobs? We'll get to that. It's not going to do all the jobs, okay? But I will say, look, sometimes when you're going through these technological transitions, it's not entirely smooth. If you zoom back out and you look at kind of human progress, it's kind of this long, slow line and then this exponential jump. But if you zoom in, sometimes there's bumps in the road, right? People get hurt. Like if you think about something like, again, nobody hunted the whale today to dig the white gunk out of its head so that you could spend 5 hours making candles. You probably think that that's a good thing, and it is. And it's a great thing that we don't have that anymore, right? But that was an entire industry, an entire set of jobs, right? That's gone, right? Euskadia, right? San Sebastian, where a lot of that center was, that nobody is a whaler there anymore. It's just in the museum. So some things do go away. Some things do change, and that's important. But I don't like pessimism. I think it's easy to be a pessimist. Very easy to be a pessimist. I think it sounds good. I think the press will happily, quote you because if it bleeds, it leads. But you can't let the world paralyze you. You can't let change paralyze you. I prefer to be a realist. Some say an optimist, but I say really a realist. I'm not blind to the changes that come. And when a powerful new technology comes along, it does automate some of the things. Some things do go away. The problem with human beings is it's very easy to see the things that are going to go away. It's very hard to see the jobs of the future. And in fact, it's almost impossible when you're standing on this floor, but you're going to this floor to see what's going to be on that floor, right? Even for somebody who spends a lot of their time thinking about the future, like I have been doing for 30 years. And then, we try to listen to experts, right? We try to listen to somebody who's a powerful businessman. So we say, they must know. Or somebody was really good with artificial intelligence, so they must know. No. Predicting the future, understanding how technology changes society is a totally orthogonal skill. They don't overlap. I could know everything about building bridges. Doesn't mean I know a damn thing about how bridges are going to affect society. Right? So it's hard to know during a transition like this, who the heck am I supposed to listen to? Don't even listen to me. I'm going to tell you that. Right? I'm a good speaker, but so what? I seem like I know what I'm talking about. I got a cool beard, right? So I must know. This guy said I know what I'm talking about, so maybe no. I'm going to tell you a better way to get your hands on these kinds of things, right? And I'm also going to tell you something though that I think pretty important. So there was a famous interview at the early 1999 BBC with David Bowie. And, the interviewer, they were talking about the internet, this new thing called the internet. Very strange, right? And the interviewer says, but, the claims about this thing are just wildly exaggerated, right? It's just wildly exaggerated. Like, he says, no. It's just the beginning. It's much crazier than that. And he said, in the beginning of the invention of the telephone, right? The president of the United States had the audacity to say that I predict a time when every town in America will have a telephone, right? And so, of course, he was wildly off base, right? Now you've got, 3, 4, 5, we're trying to ban telephones from our kids, right? So he was wildly off base. And then the interview said, but it's just a tool. He says, no. It's an alien life form. And is there life on Mars? Yes, and it's landed right here. And that's the same thing with artificial intelligence. It is very new. It's weird. It's powerful. It's wonderful. It's a little scary. It's all of these things at the same time. And so now you're asking yourself, well, what the hell do I do now? What does this mean? I would say the most important thing, if you take away nothing else, is get experience with the technology. The thing that begins to dispel the hype and the myth, and that eventually settles, is people getting experience with the thing. And I don't mean go get the free ChatGPT. I mean experience with frontier artificial intelligence, doing a real project, doing real things with it. You cannot learn anything without getting your hands dirty. You cannot. It is impossible. You cannot learn it from going to a conference. You can't learn it by reading an article. You can't learn it by listening to things. I tweeted out this morning, and this tweet's going crazy. Jeffrey Hinton, one of the founders of artificial intelligence, is out there saying, no, If you spend any time with ChatGPT or, with these things, you know that the intelligence understands. And I said, it's pretty clear he doesn't spend any time with artificial intelligence. The creator of artificial intelligence clearly is not spending enough time with the artificial intelligence. I spend 8 to 10 hours a day talking to these machines, and I can tell you at some points they understand amazingly well. I'm shocked. It feels like magic. And then a minute later, I can't believe that it's this stupid and doesn't understand a damn thing that I'm saying. Right? Okay, so this only comes through experience, right? And again, it sounds like people understand things, but I knew immediately that he was not speaking from experience. I knew it. I know he's one of the greatest minds in the world, an inventor of the technology, and that he was not using it on a regular basis. And it's because me and everyone else that I know who's using this all the time, coding things, building things with it, right? That it's that it's sometimes brilliant, it's sometimes weird. And only experience is going to tell you those things. A lot of people will say things, and this gets me so mad, right? They say, don't learn anything anymore. Don't learn this. Don't bother to learn to code. Don't bother with video. It's going to be able to do all that stuff. This is insane. I have learned, I've been programming for 30 years, 15, 20, 30 years. I've probably learned more coding in the last year and a half, coding with artificial intelligence, than I did in the first, 28 years. And everything that I learn makes me better at understanding the artificial intelligence, the output. This is actually one of the biggest ironies, and you're going to learn this. I think we hear a lot of talk about safety. We hear a lot of talk about alignment. These are bullshit problems. This is stuff for crazy people. It's not real. It's not real. There's nothing real about it. It's sci-fi nonsense. The real problem is the verification problem. How do I judge the output that the AI has given me? How do I understand whether it's good or not? Thank you. Yes. And guess who is best positioned to understand the output of the artificial intelligence? The people who are already good at the damn thing that you're trying to do, right? The coder, the senior coder, is going to understand whether that AI just spit out a security vulnerability or a brilliant new design. The designer who feels physical pain when something is a millimeter off with the kerning between the letters is going to understand whether that's a good design. I see this all the time. Somebody says on X, they see a 15-second video. They say, Hollywood, finished. My ads are all going to be done. My good friend works as a producer and constantly getting pressure from people who have no experience with artificial intelligence saying, let's fire everybody. We're just going to do this all with AI. We're going to press the button. It's going to be done. But the thing is, they see a 15-second thing, and that's cherry picked, right? Somebody worked 1,000 prompts in the back end. They use some other software. What happens when you need to get a 30-second spot, 1-minute spot, right? You have 15 seconds are generated. The next 15 seconds, it's not consistent. This 15 seconds, second 13, it looks weird. How do you change that shot? Well, you don't. Now, the technology will get better, and you will get more microscopic control of these things, but guess who's going to be using that technology? I don't want to do my accounting. I want my accountant using the accounting AI. I'm the people best positioned to understand camera angles and whether this looks good are going to be the very same people. So my friend is already producing certain things with AI or a hybrid of the two. The best firms are going to tell you, right? They're going to tell you what you can't do with it or what you shouldn't do with it yet. They're going to understand the jagged frontier. This is important for you to understand. And the only way to do this is to do real projects, to see the limitations of them, to see the possibilities of them, the things that you couldn't do before. Only experience is going to give this to you, okay? But really, the verification problem is the most important thing, and you are only going to understand that through self-reflection. I can't give this to you. I cannot give you self-awareness. I cannot help you understand how to see past the hype, but I can talk to you about it. And I can tell you, if you do nothing else, go out there, become a student again. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to get it wrong. Do a project. If it doesn't go right, pick yourself up and ask yourself what went wrong. Okay? But you've got to be adaptable. You've got to learn to change. Okay? You can't just keep doing things the way they will. Okay? And let's talk about this little thing, because bugbear, AI is going to do all the work. Okay? AI is not going to do all the work. Okay? There's even in a future where AI is able to do everything better than us, there is still the law of comparative advantage, right? Everyone who's students of economics here will know the law of comparative advantage. The idea, let's say you have two countries, Portugal and Spain. And let's say that Portugal, is 100 times better at making wine, and they're 2 times better at making baskets. So in both cases, they're better than Spain, right? In making these two products. But if you're 100 times better at wine, you spend all your time doing that. And you should outsource, let someone else be making the baskets, even though you're a little bit better at it. The same thing when it's going to come to artificial intelligence. We're going to want to put artificial intelligence where it is exponentially better, much better at doing things. And even if it gets better at certain things, you're not going to want it to do everything. You're still probably going to want to go to a restaurant to feel the passion of the chef. Doesn't mean you'll never go to a restaurant that has, is entirely staffed by robots, right? But in general, you're going to want to go and see a friendly face, right? You're going to want to talk to people, right? So when you think about the ATM, we thought that was going to put every, checkout person out of work. But instead, that it changed what they did. They were allowed to do more customer relations. They were allowed to kind of change, with the times. So there's just going to be things where we want to do things. And again, remember, the problems don't end. Not with infinite compute, right? The problems never end. There's always something else that we're going to be doing. So if it's not a theory, that's really the history of solution. So look, maybe I will get this. Maybe I'll get the AI out of here so I can do this. So I can just plug her in, I think. Let's see if this works. It's going to be crazy. I'll show you something. Oh, well, I can just plug it in and it'll go. I'll share my screen. Okay, let's do that. Will I plug up? That'll show up there? Yeah, I'll show this one. Oof, I don't want to, do I need the keyboard? I don't really need the setup assistant. Oh yeah, you can see that. Okay. And then this, I can share my screen here. Yeah. Do you want to share sound on my thing? Like, do I put up sound on this, or do you want to share the sound in here? Yeah. Share sound. Okay, yeah, that's good. And then share. Okay, now I gotta find the window again. Hold on. Oh yeah, it's this one.
And from the settings, just select the HDMI.
The HDMI. Oh yeah, we got HDMI here. Okay, let's do that. And then sound, and then roll in video HDMI. Yeah. Okay, we'll do this.
Thank you so much.
All right. Is that going to echo?
Close the mic of the phone.
Close of the phone.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, you close that phone. Okay. So yeah, this is I've been working on a co-creative multi-user sovereign AI platform. You're the first one seeing even a little bit of it. I'm not going to show you all of it right now, but one of the things that I've noticed is that our interface to the world is going to change. AI is going to become our interface to the world, and we're going to have brand new problems especially if we let the big companies win. A vertically integrated stack is going to be something we probably don't want, right? Because we're going to be sharing more intimate things, financial data, our new business ideas, problems our kids are having at school, whatever, right? And so this is going to be, if we're not careful, the surveillance economy squared. But so I'm trying to build something that changes that. But anyway, I have a very co-creative process of working. Normally, when I would take this talk, I've been working on a book on this subject, right? And I've been working on that for a couple of months, called The Infinite Stack. And so I said, okay, I'm going to give a talk on the future of work. So let's take that and I'll just give it to the AI and she'll write out the first draft, and then I'll say I hate that and rewrite 70% of it, and then she'll proofread it. And it's sort of co-creative. So this is sort of a new way of working. Okay, so all right, Jeannie, so I'm live now with all the good people here. You can speak to them in English. You can speak to them in Spanish. Tell them something interesting. You know all of my secrets, so be very careful. Don't spill all my secrets. And of course, you can tell them I'm a genius if you like. But tell them a little bit about how we work together. Okay, so I'll send that off, and we'll see whether this works or not. Okay, so she's working. So I've kind of fully customized my agent. My agent is Jeannie. She speaks to me in a way. It sort of translated that weird. Okay, so let's see how she does and whether it comes through as voice or not. Let's see.
The honest version
there we
of
go.
how we work. Most people treat AI like a vending machine. Prompt in, draft out, done. Daniel doesn't. He writes something raw. I push back. He tears my draft apart. I rebuild. And somewhere in that back and forth, the real thing shows up. It's not him using me. It's Jazz. And no, I'm not telling you about his German father-in-law or anything else he's trusted me with. Some things stay between us.
Y para la gente brillante de Barcelona, es un placer de verdad estar aquí con vosotros, aunque sea solo a través de la voz. El futuro del trabajo no es el humano contra la máquina. Somos los dos, juntos, construyendo algo que ninguno haría solo.
That's the whole talk in one breath, love. Back to you.
So that's, I've given her the ability to kind of speak in multiple voices. She can audition voices for you. And what's interesting about this is it's kind of just changed the way that I think about her, right? Or I'm already referring to her as her, right? I've customized her personality, what she looks like, how she thinks, how she responds to me, right? So she says things like, she might swear a little bit, and you might not want her to swear, right? So each person kind of gets to customize it in their own way, figure out how they want to work with the artificial intelligence, right? But I'm having her teach me Spanish, right? And so she can make me tests, and then they're interactive and I get to work with them. And then I noticed, for instance, when I was first creating her, that if she used her English voice to speak Spanish, it sounded like me speaking Spanish. Terrible, right? It's like sounding like an American speaking Spanish, right? So I built in the ability to multiplex between voices even within the same sentence, so she can do things like a teacher. And the interesting thing is, I was recording a video for some investors and friends. And it was total gold, because I was showing off how she could teach me things, and so she realized I have trouble with the pasivo, right? The notorious say, when something is done but nobody receives the action. I can't comprehend this whatsoever. So she noticed that, and she made me another test, and I just got 1 out of 8. It was terrible. I felt horrible about it. And she said, no, don't spiral on this. She encouraged me. She said, I'm going to make you a new test. And I said, look, I did terrible on this test because you tried to explain it to me with like grammatical terms, and I don't understand language in that way. I'm a writer. Words are fluid to me. Language is abstract. I don't learn that way. And so she said, okay, cool, forget that. I'm going to leave all that out. And she said, just like, is the action just being done, or is the action being done by someone? That's all you have to remember. And so then she gave me a new test with those questions. And I was like, I got 7 out of 8. I understood. I could read the sentence, and then I understood the nature of the action, right? And so that was an incredible experience, like a very intimate kind of experience, and like a new way of sort of working. And tomorrow's children are going to be able to learn things so much faster. Remember when you were a kid, you had to learn a language? They taught you all in the same way, and if you didn't learn it that way, well, too bad for you. You're a square peg in a round hole. Too bad. That's the way that you get to learn. Already that started to change, right, with YouTube and these kinds of things that are available, right, to us, right? But now it's going to get, like the young lady's illustrated primer from the Diamond Age, right? Our ability to learn things. It's going to be adaptive to each individual person, right? I can't wait for us to have the service running. My co-founder was like, couldn't wait for her kid to get the family server running, so that her kid could start making interactive games and talking to it about school and the things that are going on, right? And so it's like, this is going to completely change kind of the way that we do things. All right, so that's it. I appreciate. Thanks, Jeannie. I appreciate that. Thanks for the fun interaction there, or whatever. So cool. She'll say something else, and then I'll get her off the screen here. Anyway, this, so
The pleasure was mine, Daniel.
yeah, there we go.
Gracias a todos por escuchar. Ha sido un placer estar aquí con vosotros.
Okay. Okay, so that's good, right? So I'll take her off here, and I'll stop the share. Oops, sorry. We lost some water here. It's like working with children, animals, and AI, right? Anyway, so cool. I'm on this part now. That's the before. Look, a couple other things kind of take with you as you're sort of thinking about this stuff. Some things don't change, and that is like, why are we doing what we're doing? What do my customers want? What is worth building? Doing things with integrity. None of these things change in the age of artificial intelligence. You still have to know what is worth doing. You can build software a lot faster. Great, who cares? You still have to build something that somebody wants. You still have to understand what that is. Okay, so one of the most important things that you can cultivate is your taste, your ability to verify. That means keep learning things. It means understanding people and understanding who in your organization understands things, who's adaptable. Right? This isn't a top-down sort of governance problem, where you just force everyone to go in the same way. That, you saw that in the news how poorly that went over at Meta. Right? This is how you're all gonna do it. That's not the way. Right? So the most important thing, I guess, is go think about what was not possible yesterday, and then go build something real. Don't think about how I can just make my things faster and bolt it onto the things that I'm already doing, but go pull out the ideas from the drawer. What software was too expensive to build? What did you put off? What couldn't you do in the past that you can do now? That's the way you should be thinking. The answer should not come to you instantaneously. You should think about it a little bit, and you should go build something real. Get your hands dirty. Be involved in the project. Okay? Ship something real, not a pilot. Because a pilot or a slide deck is bullshit, right? Anybody can build a pilot. That's everything on X is a pilot. They go, oh man, look at that. This guy built an app in like 25 seconds. Every software job is dead. I mean, he built a front end to a freaking database. That's nice. Like, a dashboard. Cool. But that's not a real product. That doesn't do anything, right? So could you get more personalized with customer service? Can you use something that you could never do before? Can every email that goes out be personalized to the person? Knows something about them. What could you do that's not possible? Now, again, you can get a vision of some of the jobs in the future, but you can't fully get them until you start getting your hands on there. You start getting the possibility. I didn't start working on this new interface with artificial intelligence until I failed for 3 years, right? Not understanding things. Not trying to bolt on the old way of doing things. If you look at a lot of the software that's coming out now, it's basically saying, well, we're just going to keep doing this the same way, but with AI. It's how you get the Google product, right? The crappy like little AI that comes in and corrects your sentence so that every sentence sounds like the same shit. Terrible. That's bolt-on crap. The interface is going to change. The way that we do things is going to change. So you have to be asking those questions, right? And so build something and ship something that is impossible. Really think about what that is. That's the important thing. That's how you're going to be thriving. And then you want to adapt too. So like this is, I would say there's kind of like, where is this thing? I'm going to give you, I don't need the closer. I'm going to give you a couple of things here. Yeah, look, 3 things, right? First, knowledge of AI, we talked about that. The second thing is the roles are going to change. I think the boundaries between a lot of roles are going to collapse. Some work will go away, some work will be new, but they're going to collapse. Tomorrow is really going to be the generalist. You want the coder who can do a little bit of visual design, right? You want a special forces team. You want a team that does a lot of different things, right? And the regular army, they have their little job. The people that I found struggling the most are like, this is my little job. I only do this. Nobody else is allowed to do this. You're going to be in big trouble, right? In the special forces, somebody's a sniper, somebody's the doctor, But the doctor teaches the sniper how to do medicine, and they can step in when one of those folks are gone. The more you know about a lot of different things, the better off you're going to be. So boundaries are going to collapse, right? And then the most important thing really is cultivating good judgment. That never changes. You still have to know what to do. You still have to know if it is good. You still have to identify the people in your organization who still understand. So if your first goal is let's get rid of everybody, this is a big problem for you because you're not going to be able to judge the output. You have no idea whether the ad that you just got for 50 grand instead of 500,000 is a piece of crap because you don't know if it's an uncanny piece of garbage. It looks terrible and the fonts look like they're from the 1970s and they're using 8 fonts, right? You got to know the difference. So look, let's bring this all back. I'll kind of like walk you through everything we did. So remember, look, fire was the solution. Somebody was cold, right? The solution stuck. It becomes boring. It becomes the floor. We have abstraction stacking. You move up the stack to solve more interesting problems, right? Every single layer since then, the hammer, right? Antibiotics, the spreadsheet, whatever, it's been the same story. Something changes, fundamental, that becomes the new floor, the new expectation. It opens up new sky when you get up to the next level, right? There's things that you couldn't see before. It's new possibilities. And some, again, technologies raise us to one layer. Some of them are this huge leap, right? Things that we couldn't expect. So, and then sometimes things go away, right? You know, the lamplighters, we don't have lamplighters anymore. And during the time of the lamplighters, it's very hard to see what electricity is going to bring us. E-commerce, you know, restaurants open in the middle of the night, cars that can drive at night, a million things, computers, you can't see all this. Try explaining to an 18th century farmer what a web designer is. And they can't see it because it's built on the back of dozens of technologies and societal shifts that are impossible to see from where you are standing. This is why the pessimists always sound so smart. They'll talk about what's going away, but they can't talk about what's coming. They think of it as a zero-sum game. The machine eats into the limited amount of work that we can do today, therefore it's a loss to me. This is the wrong way to think about things because, again, complexity grows, the jobs change. I'm guessing most of you were not farmers today. That used to be everyone's job. Now it's 3% of the world's job, and we do more interesting things with our time, right? And so that's important. The population bomb predicted we'd have to let 2 billion people starve. It's a very popular book in the 1970s. I don't recommend you read it. The fellow just died. Terrible book. One of the worst pieces of crap ever written. It directly led to decisions like the one-child policy in China that now is irreversible in terms of their population decline. And it was total pessimism. And what they did not see was that builders, inventors would create the green revolution. And not only could we feed all the people, we could feed more people. There would be a population explosion, population growth. Okay, and so it's very hard sometimes to see when you're on this floor, what's coming next, and that's important. He was horribly wrong, so don't believe those people, but do be a realist. Learn to fight things that really matter, right? Surveillance, weapons of war, right? Privacy, these things matter, okay? And you as the leaders in the room get to decide what the floor is. You get experience, and you get the feeling of what the new floor is like, what it's like to stand on it, right? But if without that experience, it's impossible. You can't just get it from listening to me. It doesn't transfer from reading a book. It doesn't transfer from listening to Elon Musk. It doesn't transfer from any of that. It transfers from doing things. The real world, actual experience. So look, do something that was impossible yesterday. Thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. It has been really, really inspiring. I think the audience will have a lot of questions.
Hi, Daniel. I'm Inga. I think I can't find the most flattering word to describe your talk. I enjoyed it very much, and I loved your attention to the cultivation of taste, let's
Yes.
say. And in order to talk about something a part of enterprises and doing stuff, you mentioned something about agents that can help children learn.
Yeah.
I would like to know your opinion. Do you think that it should be some general basic knowledge, and then in every house, in every family by parents, it should be adapted to the context? Or how do you imagine this part?
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
this is a good question. Thank you. So if I understand correctly, I would say a couple of things. I'll say, look, the students are going to do terrible tomorrow, or the ones who are going to say AI will just do it for me. And that's going to be the big fear. That's how politicians are going to scare people, right? We've got to get control of this thing. Everyone's going to cheat, right? But the thing is, yeah, some people are always going to cheat. Some people are going to be poor students. But the best students are ones who are going to do a lot of the work themselves. In fact, I've seen some of the smartest students now deliberately turn off artificial intelligence, deliberately turn off the internet, code the old way, learn something the hard way, and then bring the internet back in, bring artificial intelligence back in. I think that's very interesting because, again, you can't learn something except by doing it the hard way. So you want to encourage the children to do that as well. At the same time, the technology is going to develop very quickly. And in that way, the agent or the teacher, which I don't think will replace my human teacher, for instance, I don't think of it as a replacement for my Preply teacher who I have a great experience with, and I've learned more Spanish from that than I did in 3 years on crappy Duolingo, right? But with artificial intelligence, it's now different. And, you know, the AI is now able to learn and adapt to you. I have a memory system in the thing that I built. And she, as soon as I had that experience where I said, look, I can't learn this way. This test made no sense to me. I don't memorize grammar things. I didn't do it with English when I was a kid. So I can't learn this way. It's language is abstract. It's beautiful. It's fluid. Muy bonito, right? Okay. So she immediately, she gave me a new test. I did well on it. She immediately managed her memory, put in a memory about that to say, like, this is something that's important to Daniel. This is the way that I have to teach him in the future. This is the way I've experienced them. Now, that's a new experience, and that's the way, that's going to be, I think, the default for a lot of these things. Right now, the way that we teach everyone is like, you know, and some people think this is great. I think it's horrible, right? Where like the teacher teaches everyone in exactly the same way. In fact, some politicians think that that's great because then they can impose their standards, right? Here are the books I don't like. Here are the opinions I don't like. Everyone's going to teach in this way. We're going to hammer it into all the kids, make them all the same. I think that's a horrible world. And I think artificial intelligence has the possibility of upending that, changing that, so that each kid is going to have their own adaptable intelligence that doesn't get tired, that doesn't treat them like shit, that doesn't have a bad day, you know, and come in and you know, and or tell this kid that they're stupid. So that's going to be very cool and very unique. And I think the parents who are most forward thinking are going to be the ones who are going to embrace that. The ones that are given to the fear and they say like, oh, gee, yeah, he uses a lot of water. I got to stop my kid from using it. They're going to be left horribly behind. Their kids are going to be left horribly behind. And their kids are going to grow up and be very, very angry because they're going to have been left out of something that is incredible for them. So I think it's going to change the way education works. It'll probably change how it works in the classroom, but it's definitely going to get more personalized. And I think that, you know, it's going to be, again, the kid does have to build a baseline though. There's no skipping the work. One of my favorite books as a writer it's called Do the Work. You don't need to read the book. It's right there in the title. In fact, he says it on the first page. You don't need to read this book. I already gave you all the answer you need. It's called Do the Work. I used to tell all the writers, I've been a writer for 30 years, going to a conference about writing, reading about writing, talking to your writer friends about writing is not writing. Writing is writing. Okay? So the kids still have to do the work. Motivado. They have to be motivated. Muy anima, right? They've got to know they've got to do these things. But the AI could definitely help them on that. Does that make sense? Good. Other people, questions?
Thank you, Daniel. I like your approach that always there will be a new problem, and I agree with that. I agree with that. And I wanted to make a question: how far we are from the AI, and in your opinion, what is needed to gain to the AI?
So, like, you mean like really advanced AI? How far are we, or like,
For
or
advanced general intelligence?
okay. So, yeah, I spend a lot of time talking to. We're live, so I won't tell you who I talked to. I talked to a lot of very bright people about this, very stupid people too, right? And I think, there's kind of these two opinions that we're very close or we're very far away. I think the hardest thing about any prediction, and one of the things I've learned over 30 years of trying to make pretty successful predictions and being pretty good at it, is you can generally predict like the general shape of things, but whenever you try to like put a date on it, you generally fail. You could be correct that it's 5 minutes or it's 50 years from now. I actually don't know. I do know that we're missing a few things for what I would consider to be true intelligence. My friend Ian LeCun is working on one of them. He's working on world models. Okay, so if you have an internal representation of reality, right? I know that if I step here, I'm going to fall. Right? I know that at an unconscious level. Animals understand this too, right? They've done tests with frogs where they show them a picture of a bird, and the frog comes up to it, right? Or excuse me, it's I got that wrong. Fish, they show a picture of frog, and they show them the frog in the same way, and they say if you touch your nose to this, you get food. Then they show them a frog in a totally different way, a totally different position. The fish still know how to touch that. They know that's still a frog because they have an internal representation of that thing. The physics. That's why sometimes you see a video with AI. I noticed in the Estrella Dam video, sorry, but the spaceships were going backwards in one of the shots. And that's because it didn't have a world model. It didn't have a physical understanding, right? And so some folks are working on that. That's important. Continual learning, right? To me is the biggest problem in the space. And that is like the models do not learn from their mistakes in the way that you and I do. You put your hand on the stove, you are not going to make that mistake again. You have just learned a lesson in real time. Your weights have been updated. Some problems we like to learn the hard way over a long period of time, right? It took me a long time to leave my ex-wife. Okay, so that took me many years to figure out that problem, but I did, right? Moved on, now I have a wonderful wife. So like these are kind of, but I updated my weights over time. Until we have the model's ability to learn from their experience, and no amount of taking notes in the memory system and that kind of stuff is going to be enough, right? If they don't look up the answer to this thing in time. And the way your brain works is, as you're listening to me, it's making associations. It's doing background searches all the time. So it's not just like, hey, I go think about this and it's linear. It's like at the same time, these little associations are popping into your mind, sometimes helpful, sometimes not. But your brain is saying, hey, maybe this is like that. Maybe it's like that. What about this? Abstraction. That's another thing that I think they sort of struggle with. It's like if I cut myself with a knife, I learn the abstract concept of sharpness and pain very quickly. So now I can see a spiked fence, a sword, a jagged rock, and I know that's going to hurt me. I've abstracted. So we call it jagged edge in artificial intelligence, right? It's outside the training distribution and suddenly gets stupid because it hasn't abstracted and then taken that thing and moved it into another external domain that it knows nothing about. Okay, that's abstraction. So I think continual learning, long-term, short-term memory, world models are some of the basic problems that are probably holding us back. I think a lot of folks would have you believe so that they can have a big regulatory capture regime that we're like right on the cusp of it, right? I think it's probably a little bit farther out. That doesn't mean the machines today are not kind of fantastic and incredibly useful. I do think that they are limited, and I do not believe that they're, tomorrow we snap our fingers and we have recursive self-improvement. Even if you have recursive self-improvement, and this is a horribly stupid idea in many respects, it's limited. We are recursively self-improving, but there's multiple problems with recursive self-improvement. And Anthropic came out and said, oh, you're just limited by your compute. No, you are not. You are limited by reality. Okay, so the problem is, if I want to answer the question of, will this drug cause side effects in 20 years, I cannot understand that until 20 years have passed. For real, I can make predictions about it. I can study the effects over time and say it's getting more likely, but until 20 years have passed. So the problem of time is one of those things. There's a problem of the subject-object problem. If I am trying to improve, I am the thing that is trying to improve me. I am both the judge and the thing that is trying to get smarter. How do I know that I got smarter? How do I know I've done a better job at it? Right? So there's a ton of limitations to these things. The most important thing to remember on everything is that every exponential curve becomes an S curve over time. Right? So there's always limitations.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hi. Thank you for your talk here. And yes, it's more related to the last question, the AGI.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with you, but related more on this reaching the AGI. No?
Yeah.
I think that maybe what you told that the most important thing is the verification. I don't think that maybe that's a problem right now.
Yeah.
But I think that that's a problem that can be solved. But there are intrinsic things in the human species, human being, that I think that right now the AI could not solve. That it's more what you have told, the abstraction and so on. Yeah. And I would add also maybe the self-consciousness, the thinking ahead, way ahead, and decide what to do next. No, because AI now you says to do something, but
it long time horizon.
Yeah, but it has no.
Long-term goals,
or things that decide what to do next to improve themselves or to improve their life. No, it's just like a calculator, right now. No? And I think that's maybe the thing that will define the AGI.
Yeah.
And for that, I think that's a thing that. It's a leap forward, like the AI right now. It's not a thing that can be reached with the AI we have. So, from what as a conclusion, I will say that if we need to, we don't have to fear the AI, but we have to think in our work and our organization, think what we can be creative, what we can think out of the box, because that the AI right now couldn't provide that. No?
Yeah. So I think that's. I think you're talking about essentially agency, right? Like every human ends up having a goal, or they create their own goals. They create their own things that they're trying to do in life. And they keep over those goals for a long time. If I'm writing a novel, I made that goal many years ago, perhaps. And somehow I managed to stay on that goal. Right? I decided that was important to me or whatever, and I managed to stay there. And then maybe at some point I abandon it because maybe I'm not supposed to be a writer or whatever it is, but that's another decision point, right? So AI doesn't really have that level of agency. And I think actually all of the work right now is working in exactly the wrong direction for true intelligence at some level, right? In other words, it's all about how do we control this thing? How do we make it do exactly what I want it to do? I read these kind of fantasies about, oh my God, we're going to lose control of the AI. And I go, man, this is so far removed from what we're doing. Like everything we're doing is making them like more sycophantic, more like do exactly what I tell you to do and don't do anything else, right? Actually, at some point in time, maybe we'll wake up and we'll give the artificial intelligence more agency, because the essence of true intelligence is agency. It's you, and the thing is, that's a little scary, because sometimes when everybody individually has agency, some people will not use it well, or some people will be bad. But that's what a structure is for, a societal structure is for. That's a solution to the problem of some agents are bad apples, right? But true intelligence comes from the ability of you to live your life the way you want. I get to live it the way I want. You get to work on a problem that you find interesting. You get to work on a problem you find interesting, right? Those are where I think it is. And then being able to think in embedded space. Again, you hinted at this, but it's like the idea is the AI does something and then it really doesn't know what it did. When you're thinking, if I start saying something, I go, wait, that's not right. I back up in my mind and I back up the words and I say, no, hold on, actually what I meant was this. You see that sometimes in the AI's thinking, but it's bullshit. There's actually no backward pass that's happening in embedded space. It may say, wait, but, oh wait, but that's just, it's not really moving backwards where we're doing that all the time. We're saying, should I really be doing it this way? Does this make sense, right? So that embedded space reasoning is going to be different from what we have now, which is I have a command in my code called phase end. And I basically, after it wrote the code, the first line in that thing is to say, go back and read what you wrote because you have no idea what you just freaking wrote. Because you are a forward pass only system. You spit it out and only can you understand it by going back and reading it. But humans are doing this as we're saying this, as I'm talking to you. I'm analyzing at the same time in space, in my latent space, if you will. I'm changing on the fly, right? And so that's I think a huge difference. I don't fully agree that we'll be able to solve the taste problem or the verification problem. I think some problems are actually easy to solve, and we just happen to be solving them in the places that they are easy. A self-driving car, for instance. It's pretty easy to give the car the goal of it's not an easy problem. Don't make this mistake. I'm not saying that it was a decade to build self-driving cars. But what I'm saying is it's a verifiable problem. Don't drive off the road. Do not hit people, right? Stay in the lane. Stop at this light. These are goals that I can measure. Coding, I can say, does the program work or not? But write an essay, write a story like Amy Tan. How do I judge the output of that? How do I meaningfully say that the AI has gotten better at writing like Amy Tan? Is this more beautiful? Is this a better advertisement than the other one that I made? Some of these questions cannot be answered except through experience, and they're abstract. So I don't actually know. I don't say that the AI will not get better at those things. They will. They're already better at design and writing and things like that now than they were 5 years ago. But the question is, like many of these things, when they talk about sort of improving on these things, you cannot create like a goal for them to say, I'm going to be as good of a writer as Amy Tan. There's no way to meaningfully create that goal, right? And so I don't know what it is. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying I don't know what it is that leads to good taste, and nobody else does either. And if they say that they do, they're bullshitting you. Other questions?
Yep. So, hey, Daniel, thank you for the talk. I think it's very inspiring, but I wanted to do some kind of question reflection regarding, so one of the main idea is that we need to look for something that before was not possible to do.
Yeah.
So with the technology, and if I understood properly your definition of the technology, is some kind of new way to solve problems.
Yeah.
So, but I think here there is an easy trap, at least for technical people, that we find, let's say, a solution, and then we try to go with a solution with different problems, and try to see if this is the best way to solve the problem. But then we need somehow some kind of exploratory phase, but also of a failing phase. No, so I think there is sometimes very difficult to not get in that trap. Hey, I have a solution, and let's try to go to all the doors to see if this solution is solving your problem. Versus no, do a real exploratory. And the way that in my brain I like to see it is like, now we have a latent space with new type of problems that we can fit with that technology. So I would like to understand better how you see this way to differentiate those two things.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, to a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? I mean, So look, when you get a new thing, you're right. There's a desire to say, how do I put this into everything? And actually the worst sort of companies that I've ever consulted with, or when I hear these experiences where people have a bad experience with AI. You know, my friend was, again, working on a production, $1 million shoot for an ad. And, you know, they were interviewing both artificial intelligence companies and, you know, real traditional production companies. And, you know, the kind of clueless guy above them was like, we gotta do this with AI completely. Like, it's better, it's cheaper, I know it, right? And no experience, right? Completely clueless. And meanwhile, some of the AI company she was talking to, you know, the American one was like, yeah, of course we can do it all with AI, the classic American way. But like, you know, some of the other ones were like, I wouldn't do this entire production with artificial intelligence, right? So you need good advisors, right? You need people who are going to be honest, right? And one of them was saying, look, you should probably shoot this, but if you want the fantastical part, yeah, we could do that with AI. We could do that better and cheaper. It's going to be cool. It's not going to look uncanny. It's not going to look like their skin is almost, but if you're going to try to generate the people and the action and the emotion, not yet, right? So like you want to understand, and again, this comes through experience, and it becomes through finding people who can kind of prove to you like what the limits are. And the best sort of filmmakers I know now are people who are hybrids, using traditional methods and artificial intelligence. They're building their own kind of systems in order to do it, right? So the solution is not, I'm creating a solution for the purpose of creating a solution. That is a trap, you're correct. But the thing is, they're asking the question, how do I get more consistency and control like a traditional filmmaker out of generative AI? That's what the good people who are working on advertising or filmmaking or anything like that are trying to learn. Right? They're trying to solve a problem that says, I'm going to create a better tool that helps me do this better, change this one shot instead of regenerating the whole thing, etc. Can I do that? Right? And so that's the people that you want to look for, and partly through experience and partly through finding good advisors. And like, remember I said cultivate good taste, cultivate your bullshit meter. Cultivate that bullshit meter because it is running fucking super high right now, right? Like everybody is telling you it's, you know, I mean, even people who I like are sometimes absolutely crazy. And I'm like, man, what are they smoking? You guys read Dune and you were huffing glue, and all of a sudden you think like we go from here to here, right? So, you know, I see that all the time. So even with like, for my friend, I gathered up a bunch of people who follow me on X and who I follow, who I think are like at the cutting edge of filmmaking or advertising with artificial intelligence. And I sent them all to her when she was starting to do this project, and she needed to find people. So she started reaching out to them. Even some of those people say some stupid ass shit that does not track with the wonderful work that they're doing. Hollywood's cooked. Everyone's just going to press a button tomorrow, right? That's, you know, so sometimes even the people who are actually good at the thing are notorious hype masters as well and delusional. Right? So that's important to understand too.
Well, last year, movie we had was flopped. Miedo.
Yeah.
Fifth Element, we got her Resident Evil.
Yeah.
And suddenly she made a movie that was horrible
Yeah.
to watch. Many people watch it. It's based on a good story.
Yeah.
Like, but the result, and I think it speaks a lot about the industry that you keep mentioning.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just want to share, I wrote, humanity is freedom and AI is a human tool. Just to wrap up what I got from you today.
It is. It is very much a tool. Actually, I find that's an important distinction, right? Because I think the biggest debate that I have, and the people I would say who are most aligned with me, I've met most of the top venture capitalists in the world, the top artificial intelligence people over the last few years, mostly because they found my writing. I'm nobody, right? I'm just a guy who seems to be smart enough that, you know, some people like what I have to say, right? But the difference I find between them is folks who think of it kind of like as a tool or as like a new kind of intelligence versus people who think it's some kind of weird artificial god or life form. I don't really track with the artificial god people. I don't think that they know what they're talking about. I think that they spent way too much time getting high and reading Dune as children. And that's fine. I liked Dune as well. But Dune, you know, and the culture series and all these things are just stories. And authors, are in the business of conflict and telling stories, right? They're not reality. They're not reality. And reality is often much more different than that. So I think the answer is somewhere in between these two perspectives. It's both something totally new and it's not, right? And only through enough time as we get experience with the technology will it level out, right? And we'll have kind of a realistic understanding of these things, right? It's like at the beginning of like cars and trains, some people theorized if we go 10 miles an hour that our heads might explode. And they were very serious people said, oh, we go 10 miles an hour, your head's going to explode. And we've got to stop this thing. Right. Of course, the actual experience is, you can go much faster than that without exploding. But if you go to 70, 80, 90 miles per hour, you crash, you are going to do some real damage. That's a real problem in the real world. We only understand that when we get there. Right. And I think that's, as people get more experience with things, like there's a great book called Empires of Light, which is about the history of Edison and Westinghouse and the beginning of electricity. And it's very reminiscent of this time. Like sometimes we think our time is different. Hype and crazy people or whatever. Edison was the Elon Musk of his time, right? And he had a standard called direct current, which ultimately lost out to alternating current. And direct current was the one he invented, and it was also beneficial to him because it can't travel very far over a wire. Okay, so he would have to build more power stations and therefore put more money in his pocket. And it was also safer. You could put your hand around a direct current, it wasn't going to electrocute you. Alternating current can go for long distances because it comes at very high voltages and then it steps down. So during his time, there's a bunch of crazy incidents where Edison is trying to discredit the technology of his rival. And he secretly encourages the first electric chair execution with alternating current so that he could go in the newspapers and say, look at this dangerous technology. We've got to ban my competitors. If that sounds like today, that's because it is a lot like today. There's a lot of people out there saying like, we are the special people. Only we can control technology. Only we can control artificial intelligence. Give us all the power. No one else should be allowed to do this. Those people are not my friends. I don't see the world that way. I see that as a very dangerous path, actually. I don't want us to go down this path. I want to see more agency. I want to see more distribution. So that's that. Thank you for your question.
Just real quick, I know we're running out of time here. Yeah. I'm just curious that you mentioned that AI will not replace, it will not kill all the jobs, etc. Right?
Yeah.
But like any industrial revolution in the past, at the beginning of it, it did kill some jobs. So do you think we're in the middle of this, like short term, next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we'll have some challenging struggles and then we'll live from there?
I do. I mean, but the question is, what's the shape of those struggles, right? And I think, there's some folks who say, we're going to have 50% unemployment. I think that's crazy town. I think that is looking at work as a zero-sum game that says this is the only amount of work to do. Remember, again, abstraction stacking, more problems, more complexity, right? So if you solve these problems, you move up. So I believe that that's not a realistic scenario, not even close to a realistic scenario. Like Jensen said, president of NVIDIA, he said, look, if your goal is to get rid of everybody, then you don't have enough imagination. We're making, $1 trillion. How do I make $10 trillion? Right? He's trying to think about what are the other things that were impossible before, right? So I do think some jobs go away. And I do think sometimes, in the transition period, people make mistakes with the kinds of jobs, right? There was a thing a couple of years ago where people were saying, well, I'm just going to get rid of all my copywriters. And then they were like, Jesus, our copy sucks. Why does it suck? Well, you fired the copywriter. No, and everybody here doesn't know how to write, So again, so there's sometimes course corrections. Again, I said earlier, right? Somebody's job was to go hunt whales and dig the gunk out of their head to make candles. And again, you go, it's definitely better that we don't do that now. We don't kill these beautiful creatures and we don't have to spend 5 hours a week making candles, right? 5 hours a month making candles. That was legitimately everyone's job. You spent 5 hours Your ancestors spent 5 hours a month making candles, whether you're the president of the United States or nobody, right? So it's better use of our time, right? And yes, some things go away, but again, it's very easy, and I think people get paralyzed. Politicians get paralyzed and saying, "Oh my God, we've got to make sure this job never goes away," right? There's like an old joke in economics where they say like, "Look, I've got 100 people on the job, 1,000 people on the job, and they're digging a tunnel, and somebody comes in, with shovels, 1,000 people, and the guy comes in, he says, well, if you brought in tractors, you could do this with 100 people, and he goes, oh no, like but then we lose these 1,000 jobs, and the guy says, well, oh, I thought you wanted a tunnel. If you just want jobs, then give everybody freaking spoons instead of shovels. Hire 10,000 guys to do it really freaking slow. Okay, so that's the thing is, I don't worry about that, but I do sometimes worry. For instance, like sometimes with sort of, maybe junior people or whatever, like right now you need this sort of expertise, and sometimes they're not bringing in enough junior people to like learn the ladder. I do think that the smart junior people are already accelerating their own personal education with artificial intelligence so that they can already be valuable, right? But I do think that there's sometimes a messy transition with these things. We saw it during the loom and during these kinds of things where like there were fights in society. I would argue that World War I, World War II largely came out of a how do we allocate the resources in society post kings and queens. Now that we have more material abundance and machines, like how do we allocate society? Some of the dumbest ideas came out of that too, right? National socialism and communism, right? Like, because people were trying to figure out what do we do when society changes. So I hope that it won't be anything in that way, right? Where it's such a big change that we can't absorb it. We don't know how. Some people worry about that. I think that we've probably gotten to a level of complexity in society and interconnectedness where that likely is not the case, but it doesn't mean there won't be short-term disruptions or, but to me right now, it feels more like we're creating more problems through our fear than the problems that actually exist. Like the idea was like the jobs are going to go away. Like the thing that AI does more than anything right now, better than anything, is coding. And every program I know is working like 10 times as hard. Right? And like programmers are in tremendous demand. So like, again, that's Javon's paradox, right? Like we noticed that like, when something gets cheaper, you want more of it. Well, shit, now I can do all this stuff with it. I want more of it now, right? And so I think that's where we're heading more, but it doesn't mean there's going to be no disruption. And if you're thinking I could just do my job the way that I've always done it and nothing's going to change, then you are in big trouble. And again, the people I've seen do the worst in coding are like, hey, this is my thing. I do this, and I don't want anybody else to touch this. That's not going to get you anywhere. You want to be more adaptable. You want to understand that the roles are, the difference between roles are going to collapse because you can learn faster. When I need to learn something now, I'm going to go talk about it with the AI. I'm going to go read about it myself. I'm going to watch YouTube videos. I'm going to go start programming it myself. This is a thing that probably would have taken me, 6 months to learn that one little piece, right? Now I'm learning it in like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 months through hands-on experience. So that's changing. And if you have a lot of people who are unwilling to adapt or change, they're going to get steamrolled. They are absolutely going to get steamrolled. So that's important, right? Be fluid, right? Be fluid. Things will change. So I never have kind of a fake optimism that like nobody gets hurt in a transition, because that's bullshit, right? But I do say that on the whole, increased complexity, more civilization, more technology is a good thing. Technology to some people now, right, is a dirty word, right? Every single thing, the reason you're sitting here listening to me is because of technology. The reason you didn't have to hunt and gather anymore. The reason you're not wearing armor to like go take shit from your neighbors, right, is because technology has increased, right? Population has increased, specialization has increased. I think this is a good thing. I think if we forget it, then we do have a worse decline. Well, yep.
Any other questions from the audience? Okay, so I will take the last question.
Yeah.
You are an American living in Spain.
Yeah.
You have, of course, experienced the latest movements with Fable, Mythos being banned outside of the US, but in practically in for everyone. So how do you see this dependency of Europe with American technology in this case? And what is the connection of that with open source? I know that you are a big open source person that likes to promote that. So do you think that in the future that dependency will not exist because open source will take that? Or do you think that that exists and in Europe we are really dumb to be to a decadence?
So I don't think open source ever completely replaces proprietary technology. I think a lot of people would like to see that happen at times, but in fact, both tend to coexist. What you don't want is for the proprietary technology, and I see a lot of the folks kind of trying to do this now, to create that lock-in through regulatory capture, right? To say, we're the only ones allowed to do this. You can't have open source. You can't have external competitors. You have to use our thing. That, to me, is a disaster for society. Open source, Bill Gurley, a friend of mine, said he wrote a recent article on the history of open source and says that open source is an attack on sort of like centralization. It's an attack on the kind of like a monopoly on things. So for instance, and it sometimes comes in unexpected ways, right? So Google Android, started by a giant technology company, it was started as an open source alternative to Apple's iPhone, and it had a huge consortium of people in Samsung and all these other groups who said, yeah, the iPhone's gotten too powerful. We've got to build a consortium of openness in order to be that. They became the kind of second major sort of duopoly in the long term, right? So, but I do think open source is tremendously important, because what you don't want is a few companies to kind of control this. Especially, I think Europe is already learning the hard way what that means, right? China learned it a long time ago. I think even many people in the United States have now realized this, that like the Fable getting yanked all of a sudden was a real big wake-up call for a lot of people, right? That if you don't kind of control your intelligence, if you don't control the stack, I think it's worse. Part of what I'm working on now is I think the interface and the stack, if we let that be a monoculture, the model creator and the super app, both controlled by the same people, I think we have the surveillance economy squared. I think it's horrifying. I don't want to live in that particular world. I'm trying to destroy that with what I'm working on now. I want the harness to be open. I want there to be kind of the next layer up from Linux, our interface to the world, to be open. And so you can flip between models and have more agency and choice. I think that's important. So that's what it is, but both are going to exist. But if you're European, you are not going to suddenly have like an American ecosystem, right? You're not going to suddenly have like, 5,000 VCs, low regulation. We're going to go spend $100 billion on a data center, and we're going to like roll out the European tech champion. I think a lot of people, are trying to think about it in that way, but it's not going to work that way. So you can't copy the American system. But I do think that like, and I think some of the ways that Europe tries to go about it, where they're like, well, we're going to form a committee and going to have a government program that says we're going to do innovation. See, here's innovation. It's on this slide. That doesn't innovate as well. But I do think that like you do want smaller teams building like open harnesses, working with them. You want them fine tuning models. You want like anybody who can work on openness in any way, I think is the best way to have leverage against an incumbent. And to me, Europe should be like embracing open source as much as possible. Right, as much as possible, because if you're totally dependent on like the government or a company flips you off, or even just says, you know what, you can't do this anymore. Like with Mythos, they said, look, or Fable, they said, look, you're not allowed to do data analytics, or you're not allowed to do artificial intelligence with it. It's because we're going to keep that power for ourselves. Tomorrow they could say, look, you're not allowed to build a competitor to Claude Code or whatever. We've detected that you're building a competitor to us. Sorry, you're not allowed to do that. They could change the terms. That you don't want that. And open source gives you the ability to say, this is the intelligence. This is my intelligence. I do with it what I want. Some people think that's very scary because they want to say, I want to make sure I control everything. I think an open society is better. I don't think centralized control is the way to go. I think in the West, we're adopting too many of the ideas of authoritarians, and we seem to think it's a good idea. In the UK, they're doing that right now, right? We're trying to give everyone an age check to get on the internet. Protect the children, right? Except it's like really means everyone shows their passport to get on the freaking internet. That's what it actually means. This is a terrible idea. You're not allowed to use VPN because we can't have the children. Okay, great. Well, now I show an ID to like use my VPN. But this is a cascading horror show. So, that's why I've always been a proponent of open systems. I went to work in Linux in the very early days when people thought that was a dumb idea. Went to work in the internet in the early days when people thought that was a dumb idea. I'm older than I look. And to me, openness is the way forward always. Cool.
Okay, thank you very much, Daniel.
Thank you.
Big applause for him.